program is brought to you by Newsworks in cooperation with the City of Eau Claire. This program is simulcast on WRFP-LP 101.9.
This meeting will come to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Beaton?
Here.
Emmanuel?
Here.
Kincaid?
Here.
Klinkhammer?
Here.
Mitchell?
Here.
Strobel?
Here.
T-Walt?
Here.
Von Hayden?
Here.
Weld?
Here.
Worthman?
Here.
John?
Here.
Thank you, Madam City Clerk, and welcome everyone to the Tuesday, October 24th legislative session of the Eau Claire City Council. During its legislative session, the Council deliberates and takes action on the agenda items before us. We have prepared for this responsibility by working with citizens, by collaborating with staff, and by reading the considerable amount of materials in our packets. We do arrive this afternoon ready to exercise our duty. We welcome citizens who are joining us in chambers and are grateful, as always, to community television for streaming and broadcasting these proceedings for people who cannot attend in person. Council does have important items on its agenda, so let us begin our work. And that starts with the consent agenda. Do council members have questions or wish to remove an item for separate consideration? I see no such request. On a motion then by Councilmember Worthman, seconded by Councilmember Zhang, the consent agenda is moved and discussion is in order. And there being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Beaton?
Aye.
Emmanuel?
Aye.
Kincaid?
Aye.
Klinkhammer?
Aye.
Mitchell?
Aye.
Strobel?
Aye.
T-Walt?
Aye.
Von Hayden?
Aye.
Weld?
Aye.
Worthman?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
And the consent agenda is passed. We move then to our business agenda with item 12, a resolution authorizing Downtown Eau Claire, Inc., or DECI, as we affectionately call the organization, to conduct Christmas time in the city on Saturday, December 2nd. On Saturday, December 2nd. Mr. Pippinger.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
The special event application before you is a new special event, but certainly not to the city. The 16th Annual Christmas Time in the City is a free, family-friendly event sponsored by Downtown Eau Claire, Inc. This year's event will occur on Saturday, December 2nd from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. and will take place on Eau Claire Street between South Farwell Street and South Barstow Street. The event will include a visit from Santa, Mrs. Claus, music, fire pits, a visit with Santa's reindeer, free hot cocoa, and cookies, and a tree lighting ceremony. I do have a map here, and it's in your packet of materials, but I see our overhead is not working tonight.
I should have, sorry, Mr. Pippinger, if you don't mind, I'll just interrupt and apologize to the people in chambers that our video is not working. I see reinforcements have arrived, so we may get it working briefly, or in just a moment. Usually there are live monitors up here, so you can see our agenda items. So we apologize. We'll get that working as quickly as possible. Sorry,
Sure.
Mr. Pippinger.
This event will require City Council approval due to the event closing down a city street. The Special Events Committee recommended approval at our October 11th meeting. Additionally, South Barstow Bid gave their approval for the project also, or for the event. Mr. Kieran Hamill is here to answer any questions that you might have, and of course I will be happy to answer any questions too.
Questions for Mr. Pippinger? I see none at this time. Thank you. And on a motion by Councilmember Strobel, seconded by Councilmember Mitchell, item 12 is moved. Discussion? And there being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Emmanuel? Aye. Kincaid?
Aye.
Klinkhammer? Aye. Mitchell? Aye. Strobel? Aye. T-Walt? Aye. Von Hayden?
Aye.
Weld.
Aye.
Worthman.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
Beaton. Aye.
And that resolution passes. Item 13 is a resolution appointing the City of Eau Claire voting delegate for the 2017 National League of Cities Conference. Mr. Peters.
Thank you, Madam President. Liberty of putting his name in a resolution is before you that would appoint him as your delegate at the national conference in November.
Questions for the city manager, or I guess Mr. Weld? I don't know. I see none. And then on a motion by Councilmember Von Hayden, seconded by Councilmember Klinkhammer. Item 13 is moved. Any discussion? And there being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Kincaid.
Aye.
Mitchell.
Aye.
Klinkhammer.
Aye.
Strobel.
Aye.
T-Walt.
Aye.
Von Hayden.
Aye.
Weld.
Aye.
Worthman.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
Beaton.
Aye.
Emmanuel. Aye.
And that resolution passes. We move on to item 14 on our agenda, a resolution authorizing budget appropriations for fiscal year 2017. Ms. Basom.
Thank you. Before you is a resolution for the third quarter appropriations, one in the amount of $107,500 for the Health Department for various grants and donations. Also included in the resolution is the reappointment of $600,000 from the treatment plant filter upgrades program to a new program for the purpose of funding the design and engineering work for the upcoming basin modification. Are there any questions? Yep, sorry.
Questions for Ms. Basom? I see none.
Thank you.
Mhm. And on a motion by Councilmember Weld, seconded by Councilmember T-Walt, item 14 is moved. Discussion? There being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Klinkhammer.
Aye.
Mitchell.
Aye.
Strobel.
Aye.
T-Walt.
Aye.
Von Hayden.
Aye.
Weld.
Aye.
Worthman.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
Beaton.
Aye.
Emmanuel.
Aye.
Kincaid.
Aye. And that resolution passes. Item 15 on our agenda is a resolution accepting the conveyance of a permanent utility easement at 97 West Madison Street. Ms. Basom.
So before you is a resolution accepting the conveyance of a permanent utility easement at 97 West Madison Street, also known as the Lazy Monk. This item was recommended at the Planning Commission's September 18th meeting. The easement is needed to allow city access to the light pole along the property. The CSM was filed May of 2015, but it didn't retain access to that property, so this is just clarifying that. Any questions?
Questions for Ms. Basom? I see none.
Thank you.
And thank you. And on a motion then by Councilmember Beaton, seconded by Councilmember Emmanuel, item 15 is moved. Discussion? And there being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Mitchell.
Aye.
Strobel.
Aye.
T-Walt.
Aye.
Von Hayden.
Aye.
Weld.
Aye.
Worthman.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
Beaton.
Aye.
Emmanuel.
Aye.
Kincaid.
Aye.
Klinkhammer.
Aye.
And that resolution passes. Item 16 is a resolution approving the 2017 Mass Urban Transit Operating Assistance Agreement with the Federal Transit Administration. Mr. Wagner.
Thank you, Madam President. The resolution before you will allow the Transit Division, under the direction of the city manager, to execute the agreement with the FTA for the operating assistance in the amount of $1,779,775. And we will be able to then, once the agreement is executed, then we will be able to draw down the funds as we've appropriately expended them.
Questions for Mr. Wagner? I see none. Thanks. And on a motion then by Councilmember Worthman, seconded by Councilmember Zhang, item 16 is moved. Discussion? And there being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Strobel,
Aye.
T-Wall,
Aye.
Von Hayden,
Aye.
Weld,
Aye.
Worthman, Jean,
Aye.
Beaton,
Aye.
Emmanuel,
Aye.
Kincaid,
Aye.
Klinkhammer,
Aye.
Mitchell,
Aye. And that resolution passes. Item 17 is a resolution approving an option to purchase Lot 26 in Sky Park, the city's industrial park, to Acre 3 LLC. Mr. Schatz.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
So, as you said, Acre 3 is interested in optioning Lot 26. The reason they're interested is they are purchasing the building that is just to the north of Lot 26. It's a building that a company named Advantech is in. So this would be a new owner of the building. The tenant would remain the same, but to ensure that his tenant has a chance to possibly expand in the future, he'd like to option Lot 26. Our policy is $22,500 per acre when we sell it. This is a 2.2 acre site, so the sale price would be $49,500 if they were to buy it in the future. Our policy is also to option property at 2% of the total price of the parcel being purchased. So in this case, it would be $990 would be the one-year option fee. If they exercise the right to, or they exercise the option to buy it, the option price is credited off of the sale price. The city's attorney office has drafted agreements. The client here has reviewed it, has no problems with the documents, has signed a few of them, and is willing to sign the rest and notarize it.
I see we have a question. Councilmember Mitchell.
Thank you. I was a little confused about the email that was attached to this in that they say they're closing on October 13th, and then they expect to execute the option right away. Why do they need an option?
So I think what he was saying, closing on the building ownership, but the option would come at a later date. Closing on our option agreement was, I think, what he meant afterwards, just to ensure that he has that ability in the future to expand it if his tenant needs to. Yeah.
And other questions? I see none, Mr. Schatz. Thanks. On a motion, let's see, where am I? A motion then by Councilmember Strobel, seconded by Councilmember Mitchell. Item 17 is moved. Discussion? There being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember T-Wall,
Aye.
Von Hayden,
Aye.
Weld,
Aye.
Worthman, Jean,
Aye.
Beaton,
Aye.
Emmanuel, Kincaid,
Aye.
Klinkhammer,
Aye.
Mitchell,
Aye.
Strobel,
Aye.
And that resolution passes. Item 18 on our council agenda is a resolution acknowledging council meeting decorum regarding access to the council dais and to consider permitting infants and toddlers on the council dais during council meetings. This item is brought by the council president, and as such, I will introduce the item with a little scenario. After that, Councilmember Emmanuel will be invited to speak if she wishes. After that, questions will be entertained, and after that, a motion will be made, as is our custom, motion made and seconded. I'll go through a little bit more of the protocol, but just so you know that we'll have a statement by the council president, followed by an invitation to speak by Councilmember Emmanuel, and then questions, if there are any. Now I'll go over that protocol one more time. So I say before you this afternoon that for the first time, to my knowledge, the city council is considering a resolution to set a standing rule of meeting protocol and to consider making an exception to that rule. Heretofore, the City Council has developed its meeting protocol by habit and by convention in the sweetness of time spent working up here together. For the first time, we're departing that habit. A brief history of how we came to this allows us all to begin our discussion with the same information. Almost a year ago, the council president received a request from Councilmember Emmanuel to bring her infant son with her on the dais during council meetings. This request rested heavy on me. It was difficult to weigh my responsibilities as the chair to maintain meeting decorum, to allow the council to conduct its business, to weigh that with my own feelings and experiences as a mother and a parent. I turned to guidance, to our council handbook, to our past practices, and to my own reflections on the challenges of parenting. I found, in so doing, that the council handbook does set expectations for meeting protocol, and that past practices during my time as council president, right up to the present, provided insight into how council has met those expectations. And lastly, I thought about my own parenting and was reminded that parenting young children is a deliciously exhausting time in life. Every one of us who's been a parent knows this. And I respect Councilmember Emmanuel, her actions to navigate these challenges the best she sees fit, and her desire to fulfill her council member duties, including, you may not know, her recent work to put together some children's activity bags, which we will have in council chambers, and make the chambers a little bit more family-friendly out there. I respect that work. And while I share all parents' deep desire to provide for their child's needs by having them close by whenever possible, because I shared those, I had to weigh that experience and deep feeling against my responsibility as the council chair, and my responsibility to citizens, and my responsibility to my fellow council members to maintain a fair, workable, and a safe place to conduct the council's business. Indeed, this last thing weighed the most heavy on me. As of late, this council has recently taken measures to make council chambers more safe for us. Measures I'm not going to enumerate, but measures of late that we have taken upon ourselves to make this a safer place. In the end, it was one thing for us as adults to place ourselves in what could be a potentially unsafe, even dangerous environment, and quite another to place a child there. For all these reasons, the council president made a very difficult decision. The council president, by the way, does not issue edicts. The council president makes very difficult decisions. And I decided then that council members could not bring their child up on the dais during council meetings. Accommodations were made, however, for Councilmember Emmanuel and her infant. A space was provided right by the city clerk. She brought her child to subsequent council meetings, including special meetings of the city council, and participated in roll call votes and discussion. Time passed. Then, on October 9th, of this year, the council president received a letter from Councilmember Emanuel's attorney asserting her intention to bring her child up on the dais with her at council meetings. She asserted the same in an email to all of you. And the attorney's letter has become a part of our council packet. A claim in the letter says, no law or rule prohibits any council member from bringing their children with them to the dais as needed. End quote. Upon receipt of the attorney's letter, the council president decided that the matter belonged to the council. As you know, Robert's Rules, which guides us, provides members the very important power to challenge a ruling of the chair. This is a precious power, and it belongs to the body. If you think about it, an important power in our local democracy. And because of that power, the chair presents the matter to you, my fellow council members. The decision is now in your hands. The resolution before us today, 1, establishes council's first standing rule, naming who is allowed on the council dais during council meetings. And 2, it then contemplates a limited exception to that new standing rule by allowing any council member, not just mothers, any council member, to bring infants and toddlers on the dais during meetings. One condition is stated to the exception, but there are many questions, but there may be many questions about the definition of that and other conditions therein. And lastly, I'll provide a review of the process before I open a review of the process. Once again, after Councilmember Emanuel she'll be invited to speak, and after she does so, questions will be taken up. The HR director is in the chambers, as is the city attorney. They are resource people for us this afternoon, but this is primarily a council matter. We are setting our meeting protocol, our first standing rule. Once questions are over, the motion moved and seconded, discussion will be in order. The resolution may be passed as is, denied as is, or amended and passed as amended. The decision will be by majority vote. With that, the council president respectfully lays this matter before my fellow council members and invites Councilmember Emanuel to speak.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you for the opportunity and the invitation to speak. I was not aware that I would be granted such an opportunity until just this moment, so I don't have any comments prepared. I do have a clarifying question that maybe I can ask to whoever would be the appropriate person. I understand that this is that this was brought up by the nature that I'm the first, to my knowledge, elected official in the city of Eau Claire who gave birth while in office and was seeking ways that I would balance my elected service and being a parent. So my clarifying question is this in response to me? Is this only applicable to me? And during our debate this evening and our conversation this evening, will there be questions about me personally? Will there be comments about me personally? Or is this a conversation about the policy in general? I'm trying to understand that for the parameters. I realize there's a lot of lot of new areas for us. So I want to understand maybe the parameters of discussion.
As the resolution is written, it is a policy question and therefore applies to a policy of setting a standing rule for the first time for all city council members, allowing them to bring children, infants and toddlers so far, onto the dais with some exceptions and then providing an exception. It's a policy question, not about you in particular.
May I ask a follow-up? So for the sake of conversation tonight, will there be comments allowed that are specific about me? Or will the comments be directly for the policy that's laid before us?
The chair will do her best to restrict comments to the latter, unless you allow a specific question that may help us clarify something on our minds. I'll do my best to restrict council questions to the latter matter.
May I ask one more clarifying question? Maybe it's a follow-up to that, I don't ask for anybody's sympathy or because I've asked for this. I celebrate the fact that I'm able to serve, and I liked your words that you used. I didn't remember them. Think maybe a delicious opportunity to be a parent. It is delicious. And at the same time, I'm happy to be a resource for respectful questions, for appreciative inquiry. And I also know that this has been a learning moment for a lot of people, and at times I feel questions or comments haven't been respectful. And so I would ask, while we're here on the floor, that they remain in the respectful sphere. So thank you.
And are there questions of the HR director, Mr. City Attorney, myself, or general?
Well, it's a general question, but it can be to any one of the three. If this would pass and a infant or toddler was allowed up on the dais, how long would they be up here? Are they up here for the whole meeting? Are they brought in and out? What is the status and the plan for that? Well, that's what my question is. How long would they be here, and would they be up for the whole meeting?
I'll take the first stab. The resolution does not set out many specifics. I think the most honest answer is actually we don't know. Mr. City Attorney, do you wish to add comment? We don't know.
And if I would, if Councilmember Emmanuel would like to answer that or not, it's up to her. I'm not asking her for a specific answer. If she would like to comment on it, she could. If not, she may not. She does not have to.
Councilmember Emmanuel, the question has been placed to you, if you wish.
I'm happy to. I'm an educator by training, so I like learning and sharing, so I'm happy to. I could only speak for myself. I couldn't speak for other hopeful electeds that also have young children. For me, sometimes it could be a limited amount of time, maybe 15, 20 minutes. Just last week, about 6 days ago, I was able to nurse my child at a city council meeting, and I hadn't seen my baby nursed my baby since maybe 8:15 the night before, between going to work and then coming to city council responsibilities. So it was very helpful and necessary to have my child nurse, which only took about 15 to 20 minutes. Some children nurse for different amounts of time, so it could be shorter, it could be longer. And it may be 4 times a year, it could be twice a month, I'm not really sure. I'll give an example. Today I've been up and working since about 6 a.m. and I actually took a half a vacation day to prepare for this and finished my preparation. My husband is out of town. We have babysitter today until 4:30. So in an ideal situation, I might have my sitter come and bring me the baby, and knowing my husband's out of work, out of town, and then arrange for whatever arrangements I need after that. I do have a very supportive family that helps with childcare arrangements, and at times it's necessary or desirable to have my young child with me. So I hope that would help.
Other questions? Councilmember Zhang.
Thank you. I was wondering if we have anybody like any city or county that has this kind of policy that we can hear about it, about this kind of children coming to meetings, sit there. I mean, I don't anybody that can.
Mr. City Attorney or Ms. HR Director, I don't personally, I don't have other examples. Mr. City Attorney?
Councilmember, is your question about in an elected official capacity or in a workforce capacity? Help me understand.
Well, I was wondering, like any city here or county that we have, someone that have this kind of policy that you can bring your kids here and then sit here and then do what you have to do. I mean, some kind of speaking tour, how they work or not working, how they affect or not affected.
Councilmember T-Walt.
Yeah, Councilmember Jonger, so are you wondering if there's other councils or legislative bodies might have something we could look at? So another city council might have a policy on this, is that what you're asking?
I was asking like are there any other cities that in this area that has that?
But in city government?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. City Attorney?
We've done some, anecdotal research on that, and I think they've come to different conclusions. Some permit it, others do not. Even in situations where the rules would prohibit it, I can't speak to whether anecdotally exceptions have been made, but for example, the Wisconsin legislature's rules don't permit children on the floor generally. Congress is similar. But other legislative bodies have decided otherwise and have decided it. The key point in my legal memo is it's an issue for this legislative body to decide on whether a council member can bring a child. Obviously, the council member's attendance is permitted. The issue really before you is whether a child's attendance is permitted.
There are questions. Councilmember Beaton.
I have more of a, I have something to add to that answer, if that's permitted.
We are in a question period, so when we get to discussion, you
Okay.
could
Thank you.
augment that answer. Councilmember Worthman.
Thank you, Council President. This is a question just about what happens with our vote, and if I could get clarification either from yourself or from City Attorney about if we vote no on the resolution in front of us, does that then revert back? Is the policy on the table your policy, or would it simply just mean that that Councilmember Emmanuel or any mother or council member who wants to bring a child could bring a child? What would be the implication if we voted no?
I'll turn to the City Attorney on that matter.
Yeah, happy to. Again, I think my memo that's in your packet speaks to that, but happy to clarify that By ordinance, the rules of council decorum are delegated to the council president. It's similar to under Robert's rules, but by your local ordinance, you specifically have that adopted in 2.08060, which I cite in the memo. So that determination has been made. There was a decision and a ruling. It was set out by the council president in her opening remarks. That's the status quo. This is an opportunity for council to consider, as is contemplated in our code, to alter that status quo if desired. But otherwise, if there's no action, that remains the rule that is in existence.
Councilmember Duval.
Thank you, Council President. I have a question as well, because there is quite broad language, and maybe it goes to the city attorney. Who would interpret distract? One of the exceptions is the child does not distract from the decorum and conduct of the business. And I also think if we have how many, numerous, what frequency, what space, allocations, how does it all fit up here? But what is the interpretation then of distract? And who makes that call? And what might distract two people might distract a lot of people, might only distract one, but they're distracted. So maybe you could speak on that language.
Mr. City Attorney, do.
Certainly. It's the same code reference and the same rules of order. We also adopt Robert's Rules of Order. So the chair enforces that if this resolution would be adopted as written and presented, that's a chair ruling. If like on any matter, there's a disagreement by the body as to whether something was distracting or any other of our rules of decorum. Somebody applauds as occasionally as the issue, and the chair reminds them that that's not appropriate decorum in the body. But using that example hypothetically, the council at that time wants to make an exception. Robert's Rules allows that by majority vote. But otherwise, ruling on those sort of issues on presiding at the meeting and decorum in it are initially an issue for the city council president.
There being no further questions then.
Madam President?
Oh, Councilmember Emanuel.
Thank you. I have some questions. I have a couple of questions. I'm trying to seek definition of what we mean. What is a dais?
I didn't look up the definition of dais. Perhaps the city attorney could speak to that.
It's a raised platform. I mean, it's your work desks, but a dais is literally defined as a raised platform, which is where you're all sitting, where we're all sitting.
I have a few follow-up questions. I'll start with just one. Thank you. I understand that the city hall is, the city council chambers may be updating the furniture and the layout here. Would this apply to a dais that may or may not be elevated from the ground?
It would seem to be very difficult to think about the future as far as remodeling the chambers. But if there is a dais, this resolution would apply to a dais.
Okay, may I ask another question? Okay, thank you. I see that this is regarding city council meetings. What type of meetings are we talking about?
The definition of meeting is being requested, Mr. City Attorney.
Well, the city council meeting is any meeting noticed by the city in which, the city council is convening to do business. So your Monday and Tuesday meetings, it would extend to other sessions of the city council, at least to the extent they're held in this space is the way I would interpret it up at your work desks. But as crafted, I take it to be a distinction from namely the North Conference Room where you periodically meet and have work sessions. But those are also city council meetings, so to the extent they're held here, the way it's presently worded, it applies to this space, your formal work desks at your city council space that you're all seated at presently.
And another?
Yes, I think this is a clarification question, if I may. It is in regards to the third whereas clause that talks about a subsequent request has been made by the council member's attorney for a limited exception to this practice. And I am not aware that my attorney made a request for a limited exception. So I'm wondering where that language came from.
I'll start. The letter from the council member's attorney is in our packet, and as interpreted, I do want to thank, by the way, the city attorney and the HR director for helping to write the resolution. It was a group effort. The interpretation of a request by the city attorney was made as it pertains to that third whereas clause. Mr. City Attorney, do you wish to further that?
I guess only briefly that, again, not a letter addressed to me. I received it eventually through Councilmember Kincaid, but it's a letter that Councilmember Emanuel chose to send through legal counsel, expressing a position. To fulfill that position, it needed to go through this step. It's not something that, I guess, absent the council president choosing to unilaterally change her position, which she would have had the right to do. But otherwise, the procedure is to have this body make a decision on it. And so that's the process, and it's what initiated, I believe, although our council president, Kincaid, certainly can speak to her reasoning otherwise to put it on the agenda, but it's what prompted the council review.
And another?
Just a thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Councilmember Beaton?
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify one more time, just because this is kind of a confusing thing, that a no vote would mean that we continue to handle situations like these as we had before. And to confirm that denying a council member from breastfeeding or feeding their child in that way with the no vote to this resolution would be lawful under state law.
Before I invite the city attorney to help me answer the question, the resolution before us is a question about whether infants and toddlers can be on the dais. That is the question before us. And we've had some clarifying questions now about what a dais means, what is a council meeting. A council meeting is any meeting that we hold in this room or in the North Conference Room that's convened, but would only pertain, this meeting protocol would only pertain to meetings held in this chambers while we are seated up on the dais. I just wanted to remind members that this resolution is about a meeting protocol setting a standing rule that names who who not by name, but who by title, I guess, by position, is allowed in the council dais is the first part, the first whereas. The second whereas grants an exception to that standing rule, brand-new standing rule, about allowing infants and toddlers of council members. But there are questions about how that would play out. Oh, that's the scope of this resolution. And Mr. City Attorney, do you have more to add? Do you have any other insights?
I agree, other than, again, to directly answer the question and to avoid confusion or any misrepresentation, it's not about nursing or breastfeeding. It's about whether someone other than those listed, council members and certain limited city staff, can be up at the dais or in any location. And that's the core issue here, and it doesn't extend to the issue that you raised.
And further questions? Councilmember Emanuel.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm wondering if there's anywhere in our handbook or anywhere else that has ever had a rule saying that there's no children allowed to be with their elected parent, or maybe that's not the right word, their parent who happens to be an elected. I probably would get unvoted if someone had a choice who might be 12.
Sorry, I missed the end of, that was the end of the question. Oh. As I outlined in my comments, we have no standing rules. We have protocol that has been developed by habit and convention over time. And that protocol is specifically stated in the handbook's 2010 issue, section 4, I think, if I have the section right. It includes a listing of who is on the dais and where the chairs are for people on the dais. And I believe there, in one handbook edition, there's a diagram of the 11 chairs. And so, though we don't have a standing rule, as I said in my opening remarks, council protocol in our handbook does say who sits on the dais, who sits up here. And Member Worthman?
Thank you, Council President. If I could ask this question of you, during the first few months of last year, there were definitely conversations among council members, maybe not publicly but privately, about the issue of breastfeeding, of nursing, and certainly that council members felt uncomfortable about it. And I wondered how much that played into your decision to originate this ruling.
I will answer that, though it's a speculative question about my emotions. I will answer it. The issue of breastfeeding is not before us, and it did not enter my mind. The establishment of council meeting protocol is heavy on my mind. It's heavy. It's heavy. I think that you have witnessed since 2009 how hard we all work, perhaps me in particular, to tell citizens out there that we have a functioning governing body. Not only that, we respect and work together. I don't think people maybe would deny that that has been an ethic of mine. And that is the primary responsibility I have, and from which my decision came and stands. And there being no further discussion, or questions, sorry, on a motion, I have to get back to, where are we here? On a motion by Councilmember Von Hayden, seconded by Councilmember Klinkhammer, the resolution on page 92 is moved and discussion is in order. Councilmember Mitchell.
Thank you. Madam President, I have some remarks that I want to make, but I wanted to inform you that at some point I'm ready to make an amendment to this resolution, whenever you and the group is ready.
I will open it up for discussion. Usually before we start amending, and we do allow ourselves some discussion, and I think that's been a longstanding habit, and I'll get back to you. Councilmember Emanuel.
Thank you, Madam President. I actually do have a question, procedural question. If there was a desire from the body to withdraw or postpone this indefinitely, is it proper to see if there is interest from the body in doing that first, or can that come at any part of the equation, even if an amendment comes first?
It would be the chair's stance that such that we don't contemplate amendments right out of the chute. We have discussion first, and if you're all silent and there's no discussion, then I'll entertain the motion to amend. The same with a motion to postpone indefinitely. We have not taken that up right out of the chute, but it would be, as Robert's Rules suggests, it is, when you have the floor, it is a motion that can be made. I think it is our practice to not make it until we've had some discussion. I guess that's the easy way. And discussion is still in order. Councilmember Rithman?
Thank you, Council President. I would be in favor of a motion to postpone indefinitely, but I just want to offer a few thoughts before that motion is potentially made. I think as we've seen, there's a lot of strong feelings, not only probably from my fellow council members, but from many of those who we serve in our community about this issue. And I think what it really boils down to for me is the fact that I'm highly concerned that we're setting a precedent, whether we vote yes or no, that could in turn impact so many other governing bodies, including city councils, school boards, county boards, state legislatures. And that worries me, because I think the more prudent thing would be to recognize that the status quo before the city council president's ruling, in my opinion, was not disruptive, in that a council member who brought her infant, I did not find to be disruptive to our ability to work on legislation and pass legislation. And there may be difference of opinion, but to me, the idea that we are sending a signal with a vote this evening, this is a new matter for us, but we're sending a signal to future parents, it could be mothers, it could be fathers, I suppose, about whether infants and children are welcome here. And that signal, I think, is something that we should not take lightly if we say no. I think a comment was made last night at the public hearing at the university that imagine if you were that child and grew up and knew, that a city council didn't feel that you were welcome at that early stage. And to me, that's something that we shouldn't take lightly. And so my preference is that we should, if we can, postpone indefinitely and revert back to the laws of our state and our nation that and local decorum and Robert's rules that already govern us and had been governing us previous to this, which call for no distractions and the ability to, as the council president says, to be a city that works and for our ability to focus. And I think we can do that without having to do this resolution. So.
Further discussion. Councilmember T-Wall.
Thank you, Council President. I think this has brought us to a very interesting point to consider. What are our rules? How do we conduct business? What does that mean? I work in a world of complexity, and so then I kind of think, wow, there's 11 of us plus 2 staff. Wow, I could be 13 at one time, 26. Brother-in-law of mine has 6 kids. The definitions are loose, toddler, infant, child, not sure what age that is. Not sure if we can do triple deckers up here to accommodate that. And I look at that, and I like the point about safety, and it is very easy to take it down to one little tiny issue and say that's what it's about. That's about running the business of what we do. And the function of this body and our considerations and deliberations, I would prefer we have a wide body of research analysis. You shared such a view on a previous item that legislation should have a good depth to it. There's a lot of factors of this. I also wonder if this is a reactionary, a discretionary item, or one that's deliberated. It is not uncommon for our world to express many views instantly with our new technology of social media, but does that go to the essence of the people of Eau Claire, or is it a small subset? And it's very hard to ferret out in a short time. When I looked at this, then I thought about, here's the question. An elected has a conflict. I need to vote, but I have a conflict. Whether that be this activity or that activity, I can't vote right now because of this competing conflict. Could be a child. Then I would also ask, well, a child or an infant, how about an elderly parent? How about a brother who was just in a car accident? Or a sister injured by some means? And I started looking at it where really I see it maybe as an issue of time and space. I need to cast a vote, and what pulls me away from it? So we could maybe look at issues of saying, we don't have to convene here all at the same time. We could look at broadly saying if that is a true thing, that we could vote by some means. Votes are tallied and we find out the order the next morning. So meeting's still Tuesday, but we vote anytime. And some legislative bodies do allow proxy or stand-in votes. Because I think when we look at a very narrow policy, the sidewalks on Street X from the 100 block to 200 shall now have this rule. That sounds not right. Sidewalks shall in this town have these following configurations. So I kind of look at it broadly. I wonder if we have a elected that is preferred for a retired class and not a working class. We've all had conflicts and we disappear. I've even had times where I have to disappear from some just regular functions and I miss a vote during a meeting and then I come back. So I think we want to look at this broad. I don't have a decision yet. I want to hear what other people are thinking, but I really want us to think about all the ramifications and not just one specific application of such a policy. So.
And further discussion? Councilmember Weld.
Thank you, Council President.
I too am still undecided. I think when we look at what's before us and the two options, I think at first that we make important decisions. And Council President Kincaid has mentioned that in the past, and I've come to realize it more and more each day that I'm a part of this council. Decisions that affect the livelihood of everyone that comes before us in some cases. Some very emotional and very hard decisions that affect their families and their futures. And I think we owe it to them and to the staff that helps prepare us, our 100% attention and focus and respect while they're before us and making their pleas and their case and speaking to us. And I think that can be difficult if there are distractions, whatever they may be. And in all cases, as Commissioner T. Walt and Emmanuel and everyone has spoken of, there are all a variety of distractions that we may incur. So, what is the right decision in that regard? On the other side, I look at us as 11 individuals that were elected and appointed to represent this community, the city of Eau Claire, and the people, their districts, the at-large citizens. And in addition to being 11 individuals, we are also one entity. We are a city council. I struggle with the idea that if, for whatever reason, physically, mentally, visually, audibly, there's been a barrier created because of any of those reasons, that as a council we should find a way to remove that barrier so that everyone can participate. I don't want to be a council of 10 plus 1. I guess I want to be a council of 11, with everyone being active and participating and discussing and voting. But at what cost? What becomes more important? Those that are here speaking before us and needing and hoping and counting on us to give them our best, or providing opportunities for all of us to be a part of that. A difficult question, and again leads me to where I am now, which is still undecided. So, thank you.
Discussion further then? Is your light on?
Yes.
Councilmember Emmanuel.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm trying to take the approach of this situation that, of course, feels very personal. I'm trying to approach it from some activists that I had a chance to meet when they went through a very hard time, where they viewed a very difficult thing as a gift and a thank you to examine one's own priorities and refine what's important to them, and how even in the face of something really hard, there's a refinement that happens. And so I want to say that I want to approach this as this opportunity can be a gift. And I think that I certainly am going to try my best to take it as that. I'll speak a little bit about my experience so far as serving for over 5 years on the City Council. When I first started my service, my middle child now, which she does not want to be the middle child, but sorry, worked out that way. We made arrangements in my family that she actually would be with her other parents' home on Mondays and Tuesdays. And so I never really had a conflict of serving with a child who was about, I guess about 7, almost 8 years old when I started my service. It worked out really well. As a parent, I have brought my child with me, my middle child now, to most things in my life, whether it was undergraduate school, graduate school. She sat with me almost every weekend in classrooms and traveled with me. She's gone to many conferences. She's gone to some of my legislative, I guess, some of the community events, and I've been able to bring her. And when you're working and being a parent and serving at times over 80 legislative meetings a year, not including emails or constituent contacts, and in a position that pays under $300 a month, it means the world to me to have my child with me. That's important to me. And it's important for her to see local government and see how this works. Fast forward to last year, I was very blessed to find out I was going to be growing my family. And I started thinking about, well, how's this going to work? Because so far, I don't have another parent's home to ship my baby off to. And I knew that it would be a new equation to balance, because in my family, we have 2 working parents, and also parents who sometimes work at nighttime, and needed to find a new way to balance that. And so for me, the many times I've already brought my child to official city council meetings has meant the world to me. There's also health reasons why I would choose to bring a baby or a young child with me. And I realize that we are not talking specifically about breastfeeding. I would say that for me, bringing my child has made a significant difference, and the times that I was not allowed to bring my child has made a significant hindrance to my personal health and to my baby's health. And that's a very difficult thing that I had to reconcile, of how much am I willing to endure this for the sake of maybe not sure what the right word is, so I guess I'll leave it there. I got to thinking, though, if this is a challenge for me, and I've been here for 5 years, if I keep staying quiet, what am I doing, or how am I helping the future generation of public servants who may have children? And it became apparent to me that I couldn't be silent anymore. I couldn't not help create a pathway for future public servants. And by me being quiet was me being complicit to restricting and not supporting people to bring their children up at the dais with them when needed or necessary or desired. But I know this maybe started because I asked for this and I got pregnant and I had a baby. But I know that this is for other people. I know that other communities have certainly found a way to make this work. I know of a current sitting state assembly woman who currently brings her children to the legislative floor in Madison. I also know of a young woman who 20 years ago, her father would bring her and her sister to the legislative floor in Madison. Really fun pictures from the 80s, I'll have to say, that she shared. I know of a mother in Michigan who's brought her child with her to public meetings. There was recently a headline that I won't repeat all the way, It's probably not proper, but it's something like elected woman brings child to meeting and dude is upset. We'll say that's the edited version. And I know that there are moms in Colorado that bring their babies to city council, to village meetings, to the state house. I know that there's a village clerk in the town of Burnside who's brought her child to public events and serves with a gentleman who brings his children to their elected meetings. I'm certain that in our country, we've already made it work. And we also know about parents who brought their children, namely mothers who are breastfeeding, to parliamentary meetings in Australia and in the European Union. And they've made it work. In fact, we received correspondence from a constituent who learned about their procedures in the European Union. And not only are children allowed, each member is given 4 passes a year to invite a family or a friend with them to their legislative service. I think that's pretty cool. They don't have a specific rule in the EU about banning children. However, they are governed by parliamentary procedure. And that is governed by the chair. And the chair, similar to our legislative body, would have that authority to ask somebody to leave if they were causing a disturbance. What I've learned in the past, I guess it's maybe about 6 days since I learned about this. I did not know that this legislation was coming until about 4:30 p.m. on Wednesday. I had no idea. And I think it's been a little spark that has set off a wave of concern and gravity in our city, in our state, and around our country. Today, we were delivered over 15,000 signatures from people all across America who are concerned about this piece of legislation. Today, several members of the New York City Council sent a joint letter saying, "This is concerning." Several members of the same city council and the Women's Caucus sent a letter saying that this is very concerning. In my 5 years, I'm not aware of the New York City Council even caring 1 ounce about Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And now, today, they do. And I feel that our country is watching our body in this resolution to say, what are we going to do about that? And again, I think that we can make this a redeeming moment to already, I mean, look at us. We're talking about this as a very important civic engagement issue. I think that we certainly can make a compelling case for why and how we can include more voices here in our elected seats and in subsequently boards and commissions and committees. And I guess the last thing I'll say is that the city, like many governmental agencies and bodies and organizations, has many plans. And I like plans. I like kind of nice, tidy borders. One of the items in our strategic plan from 2015 to 2018 says, in a vision that we have, is that Eau Claire is viewed as the place, in italics, the place to be for current and new generations who want to work hard and try new ideas. I think we're up for it. I think our city's up for it. And I want to be somebody who is really welcoming to future people who serve in this body, whether I ever meet them or not, I want to make sure that the precedent that I sent says that this is a place for you and for new generations who want to work hard here in this body and try new ideas.
And further discussion?
Seeing none. Oh, none.
Oh, Councilmember Tebow.
Thank you, Council President. Councilmember Emanuel, thank you for that. I do hear that, but I hear another sound, and I wonder, again, I want to go back to whether we use a narrow or a wide brush. The question is not of children. The question is, if I understood it right, it began with the disagreement of how the chair made a decision. The chair did provide space that was provided. Then we have the distinction, I think, between the dais or chambers. I also think, as I look at some other examples, if we were to have several toddlers, it'd be far more appropriate to have an area where they can sit and move than to be right behind my station or something like that. So I understand the point you mean, but I want to just clarify that what's before us is about really just this dais, if I'm understanding it right, compared to another section. So it is not that we have had a prohibition, but bringing it clear is one of the gems out of this. This is certainly a discussion that we will be clarifying things or making some other discussion. But thank you.
And Councilmember Worthman?
Council President, I'd like to make a motion to postpone this item indefinitely.
Point of order.
Councilmember Mitchell?
I wanted to make an amendment before we move to postpone.
Though you stated your intention to make an amendment, you didn't have the floor and make the amendment. Now there is a motion before us to postpone indefinitely, which by Robert's rules must be taken up. The motion has been made to postpone indefinitely. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Emanuel. Discussion is now in order on the motion to postpone indefinitely. Councilmember Beaton.
Thank you, Council President. I have some comments that I wanted to make, but I wanted to ask a quick question first of you, Council President. I'm not sure how to talk about this issue. As you outlined in your presentation before, this issue came about because of a discussion over breastfeeding, and I honestly don't know how to talk about this without talking about breastfeeding. And so I'm willing to try my hardest to talk about this without that context, but I'm wondering if that's going to be disallowed.
It will not be disallowed.
It will not, it will, okay. So we can, okay, sounds good, thank you. I have some serious concerns about this policy. I think that the context that was given in the resolution, the fact that we're considering a decades-long policy that has been governing our body, I think is not entirely the full picture. I think that, council has not considered children at the dais or breastfeeding during our meetings for decades because women have not served in elected office up until recently. Like Councilmember Emanuel said, to our knowledge, she is the first council member to give birth while serving. And so I don't see this as this body considering a long-standing rule. I think that this is a brand new thing that we're considering because it's a brand new situation that's happening here and around our country. And so I guess I wanted to make sure that we're holding that context, that we're not upending a long-standing thing. This is a new thing. And you know, with larger representation of women in our local governments and higher elected office, something that's so amazing and beautiful, and something that we need to continue to work toward as women continue to be underrepresented in our bodies, in our elected bodies. As we see that happen more and more, we're naturally, of course, we're going to have to talk about this and deal with this, because it's never been considered. We're in a new era where women are fairly represented. I think that I have concerns that this policy is not family-friendly and shows our citizens and the state and now the nation that Eau Claire is not a family-friendly place. I think that we all have a little bit of different opinions on this particular topic, but I don't know how this policy can be construed to see that it's family-friendly. And I think that, I've seen in other decisions that we've made on this council that we are a family-friendly city, and we do strive to be a family-friendly council. And I don't know why we would consider a policy that is, in my opinion, objectively and overtly family unfriendly. Lastly, I think that this decision is not for this body to make. I think that this decision is for a mother to make and for a parent to make. In our listening session that we hosted last night, we heard from so many community members, and one mentioned that she has brought her child and breastfed her child during city meetings, during other board meetings, during a time when she's doing business. And she did that when it made sense for her and it made sense for her baby. She also arranged for childcare when it made sense for her and it made sense for her baby. And I think that that is exactly what should be happening here. I think that this decision is up to parents. I think that I think that decisions have already been made that this decision is up to parents, and the fact that we're talking about this at all really concerns me. We've seen that, as Councilmember Emanuel said, this is not a new idea, that women could simultaneously care for their families and serve their communities. And I think that if they can do it, so can we. And so I strongly and desperately support this motion to postpone indefinitely. I, in particular, have major concerns over, we're not voting on a resolution that has to do with breastfeeding, but this has major implications on how mothers can serve their family while serving our city. And I'm not getting an answer whether a no vote would have legal implications. And so I'm not sure that I will be voting to postpone this indefinitely, but I'm concerned about the future legal issues that we may have, honestly, just because I don't know and I'm not getting an answer. So thank you.
On the motion to postpone, Councilmember Mitchell.
Thank you. I'll be voting no on the motion to postpone because I do think it is our decision, and I think it's definitely the council's decision, and I think we should make it tonight.
Councilmember Von Eden.
I'll also be voting no on the motion to postpone. The reason for it is actually what happened here tonight at the council meeting. If you notice, when the meeting started, we're talking about distraction now. We had a young child in the back that started to make noise, and the mother had to take her out. And I appreciate that the mother did this. We also had another one because the meeting drew out their young child. They left with it and it became a distraction. The problem we have here isn't a question of breastfeeding. It isn't a question of that. It's a question that if you're up here on the council dais, there will be distractions because, as Councilmember Emanuel said, maybe the baby would only be up there for 15 minutes, maybe it'd be up there for more. We don't know for the exact period of time, but that means that somebody had to have the baby, taking care of it out someplace, and the mother had to get up and go get the baby, or they had to bring the baby in. That is a distraction to what we're doing. And I think that's what we're really talking about here. We're making important decisions, not whether breastfeeding. I'm from a family where my wife breastfed our 3 children, my daughter breastfed her 4 children, and all of this thing, it's a wonderful thing. There are ways to work with it. I had the opportunity as a grandfather to help take care of the babies. When the mother wasn't available, we could give them a bottle and take care of it. So using this as a thing to talk about breastfeeding, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a council meeting where we should be able, this group, this 11 people, to make a decision, hear the information, be presented to us in the appropriate manner, and be not distracted in making our decision. And I think that's why, as Council President did, she felt that it was most appropriate that we don't have that distraction up here on the council floor.
On the motion to postpone, Councilmember T-Well?
I think of a point in the question I need to get answered on the motion to postpone. Postpone indefinitely would be then done until the next official council, which is upon any next election, correct? That new council could have such an item brought up. Is that a correct understanding of the term postpone indefinitely? Maybe I can, and then I got a small follow-up on that same question.
Mr. City Attorney.
Generally, the parliamentary motion to postpone indefinitely just removes the item from your current agenda without any direction to return it. Council doesn't meet in sessions, so in parliamentary bodies or in bodies where there's an obvious legislative session, the motion to postpone indefinitely indicates you can't bring it back in that same session. So city councils meet continuously. But the interpretation I've given, I think this came up just a couple months ago. Right, different issue was, a period of a year as what we've used. It's a benchmark used in zoning that we've kind of interpreted in, or if it's a substantially new issue. So the facts have changed considerably. The motion is substantively different. Then we'd rule it basically as a new item that's coming forward. But does that answer the question?
Yeah. And then my follow-up then is, so supporting the move to postpone would mean we'd be returning back to the order where the chair, the council president, would make discretionary decisions based on what works in the council and what doesn't. Am I understanding the motion, what a yes vote does in motion to postpone?
Answer it 2 ways. One, the fact that the council president or the chair makes rulings on decorum is based on your city code. So this resolution, can't change that fact. That would have to be an ordinance change. But on this specific issue, you have a determination, a ruling by the chair, as she described again at the beginning of the meeting, with a question posed, are children appropriate up on the dais, and her determination on that, her ruling on that was no, they're not. That issue was followed for a period of time, but then questioned, and she chose to put the item on to allow council as a whole to determine it. So if council as a whole chooses not to determine it, it remains in the sound discretion of the council president, who again has ruled to this point that children aren't appropriate up at your work desks on the dais.
Thank you. I've got a good understanding now what we're...
Councilmember Clinkham.
Thank you, Madam President. I don't want to beat this issue to death, but if this is postponed and the decision then stays with the chair or the president, it's my understanding that state statute would read that it automatically confers the right for a parent to bring a child to the meeting because it's being held in a public place where it is not restricted to a certain number of people. Is that correct?
Mr. City Attorney, a clarification on that point. Did you understand?
Meetings of the city council are publicly noticed, are held in areas that are open to the general public. Access isn't then, unlimited or unfettered. So if the question was just because it's a public meeting, people are allowed anywhere within the meeting space, that's not correct. And as we know, we have limited access to the space. The back door is locked. There's limited access points, and generally people have not been allowed up at or near our workstations. So the open meeting law doesn't go nearly that far for this body or for any other. And by determination of the local body, like was asked earlier, things like access to the floor of the Wisconsin Assembly or any others, it's for the legislature to determine its rules of sort of access. And your ordinance is set up that the first decision maker on that is your chair, is your council president. If you're not in agreement with that decision, you get a chance, there's an opportunity to appeal it, and the body as a whole gets to make the decision. And so that's the process you're moving through.
Councilmember Withman?
Thank you, Council President. I'd just like to point out for my fellow council members this evening that we've had a number of distractions of all types already. Councilmember Von Hayden. And so, and those are dealt with differently, but normally the chair, if there's a distraction, whether it's clapping, whether it's people talking in the back, or some other distraction, normally the chair interjects and makes sure that is discontinued. And so I just want to put that out there that we've dealt with distractions in the past and we'll continue to deal with them in the future. And I think an infant crying or something falls into that same category and should continue to fall into that same category.
And on the motion to postpone? Seeing no, Councilmember Emanuel?
Thank you, Madam President. I do have some comments to speak about on the motion to postpone. I'm wondering if the chair would also allow me to clarify maybe a statement that I think Councilmember T. Welch shared a little earlier about the times that I sat behind the clerk's desk.
The council president asks you to narrow your comments to the motion to postpone. There will, can you start with that?
I can, however, they're kind of like two different topics, and I wasn't quite sure where the proper place was. It's I think for me, it's an important point of clarification to have that clarification out there. I can, if you want, I can include it into my comments, but I'm also happy to share. So
I'll start with a narrow interpretation of why do you think this should be postponed indefinitely or not? Is that fair? Is that part of your?
I am prepared to speak about that. I'm also wondering if I would be able to clarify what Councilmember T. Welch, I think, understood about the reason why I would not sit at my legislative seat.
Do you mind just starting with the point about why you think postponement is or is not a good idea? Did I understand that right?
I know we have to extend a lot of grace.
Uh-huh.
It's not easy right now.
Yep.
I thank you. I would be happy, and I intend to speak about the motion to postpone. I also want an opportunity to clarify a statement that was made that I don't think is factually true, and since it's germane to kind of the bigger picture here, I wanted an opportunity to clarify.
And I accept your argument as germane. And you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think there is an assumption that as a council member that I received accommodations to sit behind the clerk's desk. And I feel it's important to share with my colleagues that that was self-selected. I never had a conversation with somebody or anybody about what else should I do after seeking options of how am I as a parent going to make this work in balancing my elected service. So after being told I could not bring my baby to the dais, I sought an opinion with the city attorney, and I asked, can I vote from anywhere in the room? Would my vote count if I sat somewhere else? And he said, yeah, your vote would count. So I worked it out that I would sit there in the first row of the public, and I would restrict myself to 3 words: I, no, or abstain. And I'm grateful that I was able to be included in the routine, regular procedure of including me in introducing items on the agenda, which is a very helpful thing that the council does as a routine. Over time, though, I found that situation didn't work. Truly, I saw a lot of people's heads in Eau Claire, and I can't think of a time I didn't like what I saw. We have very nice heads in this community. At the same time, I didn't have the opportunity to have a microphone, engage in debate, ask questions, offer amendments. And the most important thing to me is to be able to have eye contact and be present for the public as they give testimony. It took me 13 months to have the courage to say, actually, I want my seat back. I want my seat back that I earned, and that over 4,000 people offered me the opportunity to have so I could serve our city. To the motion to postpone indefinitely. I will be supporting that because I actually don't think items in the resolution are factually true. My attorney never gave a request for a limited exception for me to be here. My attorney provided me legal advice that I can just sit here with my child and feed my baby. I don't need a limited exception. I don't need to ask permission. I'm done with that. I need to take care of my family, and I need to fulfill my duties as an elected official. And I also have to provide respect for the decorum that we have in our handbook and in Robert's rules, of which I think I've done a great job at. I also have an incredibly difficult time trying to reconcile why I can't have a child here on my lap, and literally 6 feet away, I could have 3 children on my lap and be breastfeeding, and I would be allowed to be there. I think this resolution is a disincentive for people to think about serving an elected office. I also feel about the resolution, not people, the resolution, that the resolution is an illegal end run to limit my ability to breastfeed my child here on the dais. I can't agree to that.
And further discussion on the motion to postpone? There being none, clerk, please call the roll. An aye vote would postpone indefinitely, a no vote would not.
Councilmember Von Hayden,
No.
Weld,
No.
Worthman,
Aye.
Jean, Beaton,
Aye.
Emmanuel,
Aye.
Kincaid,
No.
Klinkhammer,
No.
Mitchell,
No.
Strobel,
No.
T-Wall.
Yes.
The motion fails 6-5. And we are back to the resolution so far as unamended. Councilmember Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam President. I move to amend the resolution by deleting the last paragraph. So deleting the last, therefore be it resolved. Can I get a second? I'll explain.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilmember Klinkhammer.
Thank you. So what this amendment would do is to leave intact a rule that defines the protocol for our meetings, but it would not allow infants and toddlers on the dais. My view that being on the city council is that it's not about us. It is about the citizens of the community that we serve. We ran for election to be of service. And when we're working on this dais, those citizens expect and deserve our undivided attention. And we've seen over this past year that it is impossible to not be distracted by the presence of an infant or toddler. And I just want to say as an aside that I take offense at the comment that that child was not welcome in our group, because I believe that he was, and that we were very supportive and accommodating of both him and his mother during this past year. And getting back to my point, this distraction is very unfair to the people who attend our sessions. And I'll give you a simple example. We have an individual who comes to a council meeting who's never been here before, who's here to plead with us to do something that's important for their property, for their business, for their income. And they come to the podium and they say right out, I'm nervous, I'm afraid. They're not usually public speakers. And they expect us to focus on them and pay attention on them and to not be distracted by anything. And if that happens, once in a while, as Councilmember Worthman pointed out, it's a shame, but we shouldn't provide the opportunity for that to happen. We've got to refocus our attention away from ourselves and back on the public that we're here to serve. And I do not believe that infants and toddlers on the dais help us do that.
Further discussion on the motion? Councilmember Beaton.
Thank you. I think that as a young woman myself and as an elected official, I've thought a lot about this since last Wednesday, I have thought about how long some of us have served in this seat. If I have the honor to serve as long as Councilmember Von Hayden has, I think it's entirely possible that I may see myself having a child while serving our city. And I think also speaking as a young woman who found it incredibly difficult to make the decision to run for local elected office, I can't imagine why we would add another reason for a young woman or a potential mother or a current mother to hesitate to think twice to serve our city. Maybe I'm a little biased being a young woman, but I think that our city deserves to be represented by lots of different types of people, not just people who are done having children. I think that in particular, our city deserves to be represented by young women, by mothers, and by people raising their families. And I think that this amendment and this resolution does a great disservice to our city, because we are going to see, we already see young women and young people and women in general hesitating to run for local elected office and elected office in general. And we're going to see fewer and fewer people make that decision to take that leap if they are being told that they and their families are not welcome here. So I hear you, Councilmember Mitchell, and I agree that that our service should be about the community, and it's our job to make sure that our city is fairly represented. And I think that each of us here works every hour that we're here in council chambers and at home reading our packet, working to make sure that our city is represented by us. And I think it's an equal responsibility to make sure that our communities are being fairly represented by a diverse population.
And further discussion on the amendment? There being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Weld.
No.
Worthman.
No.
Shaw.
No.
Beaton.
No.
Emmanuel.
No.
Kincaid.
Aye.
Klinkhammer.
Aye.
Mitchell.
Aye.
Strobel.
Aye.
T-Walt.
Aye.
Von Hayden.
Aye.
And that motion to amend passes 6-5. We are back to the resolution as amended and discussion. Either further discussion? Councilmember Emmanuel?
Thank you, Madam President. I do have a series of amendments. Maybe I can share a little bit about them, not necessarily the reasons why I'm bringing forth, but if I may add a little narrative on kind of a procedure, if I can ask a question. A lot of my amendments strike out a lot of the language here and add items to this. So I've already shared a copy of this during the meeting to the city manager, city attorney, and the city clerks. I'm not sure what the proper way is to do this, but it's striking out a lot of language and inserting a lot more in. So maybe I can get some guidance on the best way how to do that.
Do we have any copy of the motion to amend? No. So it's very difficult for us to go paragraph by paragraph, but it may be better than throwing the whole amendment at us. So is there a way you can go paragraph by paragraph?
Yes. And to offer clarification, I thought I emailed it as a PDF, maybe in the last half hour or so.
Oh, I don't have my email open.
Oh, okay. I have a copy of it on my iPad. I'd be happy to share and maybe put it above the screen.
So we didn't, a half hour ago, we were in session. So it's understandable that we don't have any knowledge of the amendments you're about to offer. But you could hand your iPad to Ms. Merle, who could use the document camera.
I'd be happy to. And for clarification, I am very understanding that people might not have received it. I sent it in the event that I would be offering this as a reference, and I'm certainly no implication that people should have seen it beforehand.
Ms. Merle?
If I may offer some...
I think, Ms. Merle, we can almost see that. But we can't, actually.
I don't... Do you want one of the...
Let's see. It looks like, from first glance, the council member is deleting everything in the resolution. Everything. Excuse me, but first of all, it looks, you could speak to all the X's. Would you speak to that first?
Sure. There are multiple deletions from this. It's not wholly deleted. There are some language that I would keep in the resolution, the first whereas clause, and then I have additional items for consideration that I would insert into the resolution, keeping some parts of the first paragraph.
So the only thing that you're going to offer is some words in the first whereas clause. Otherwise, you're going to delete the rest of the resolution.
Correct.
Your amendment is to that. So in that light, we do have to see what you're going, what you're going to replace that with, if anything. So now, if Ms. Merle could help us. It's hard for council to do work on the fly. It's hard. That works. Thank you, Ms. Merle. So all of those things have been deleted, except you're going to start now with that whereas up there. The first paragraph. The first bulleted list.
If I may, in the paper resolution, there's the first paragraph that says whereas, that are a few words are left there. Mm-hmm. And that one would read, if I may, whereas whereas the council president has responsibility to maintain meeting decorum, and the rest I would insert, and if the chair would allow me to, I would offer this and seek a seconder and then share what this is.
Yeah, I'm excuse me, but I need a little bit of time to
May I read it?
I'm just thinking about process. I'm going to stick with my opinion that we take your amendment paragraph by paragraph. that will give council members, I think, the best opportunity to speak to whether they want to pass the amendment or don't. So then I need a formal amendment from the council member to delete previous language and enter the first whereas.
So moved.
And is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilmember Beaton. So we can speak to your first amendment.
I have a point of just procedural clarification. So my first amendment would be striking the language whereas in this first paper paragraph, or are you intending that I would read this first paragraph that we see on the screen?
Your first amendment would strike the resolution as written and enter the first whereas clause.
If I may, the first whereas clause on our original document, I intend to keep language from the first paragraph in.
Oh, yeah, as you read. I meant to say, as you read to us,
okay,
it would be added, this language would be added to the words that you did read to us.
Okay, thank you. Yep. So is it proper for me now to read the first whereas clause on the screen?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, happy to. Whereas the 2015-2018 strategic plan includes the City of Eau Claire City Council, the Eau Claire City Council values each other and staff by fostering a collegial, inclusive, respectful, and engaging policy-making environment. Sorry. Wonderful. It is our mission to assure the common good through services essential for a safe, sustained, engaged, and healthy community. And Eau Claire is viewed as the place, the italics are in our strategic plan, to be for current and new generations who want to work hard and try new ideas.
And as there is a second to that amendment, discussion is in order. Councilmember Mitchell?
Oh, I have a question. So does that replace the other whereases in the original resolution?
The resolution strikes everything except a few, the motion to amend strikes everything in the original resolution except a few words in the first whereas clause, to which these have been added. However, we already struck the last, therefore be it resolved. There being no discussion then? Council, or City Clerk, please call the rule on the first motion to amend. Councilmember Mitchell.
Yeah, I don't have exactly a problem with this whereas, but I'm not sure I like replacing the whereases we have because they describe the background for what we're doing here. So I'm kind of confused about this. Yeah, okay.
If one doesn't want to strike the whereas clauses in the original resolution, one should vote no.
Question?
Councilmember T-Walt.
Thank you, Council President. So the vote is going to be on each paragraph, if you will, or whereas. We're only talking about if we're accepting that first paragraph in place of.
No, as the council member moved, the motion strikes every whereas clause in the original resolution and begins by adding back the first whereas clause.
In the first whereas, the language remaining is whereas the council president and under the chair's responsibility to maintain meeting decorum and whereas the 2015-18. Okay. I've got that right. I just wanted to.
Okay. So if you don't want to strike whereas clauses in the original resolution, you need to vote no.
To go with this, we vote yes. To go with what we had, we vote no.
Right.
Anybody repeat what I just said?
Thank you, Madam President. Asking a procedural question, when and where would it be appropriate to offer the amendments that I have in the therefore be it resolved for additional paragraphs?
So the chair, we always struggle with, doing things on the fly. We struggle with that. Sometimes it works better if we break down a large item which we haven't seen before. It helps us if we break it down. Therefore, by therefore, by therefore. However, I can understand council members' difficulty in such that this motion to amend does really strike the whole, the original resolution. So we're working between those difficult options. We could also take up your motion to strike everything in the original resolution and replace it with all of that. And that may seem less confusing?
Just to clarify.
Okay.
Can you clarify again, are we work multiple times or just one time on this?
Yeah.
I'm
Okay, so let's try this. The council president would seek a change to your motion. That your motion to amend strikes the original language in the original resolution, save for a few words as defined in the first whereas clause, and replaces the resolution with the language on the screen. Is that an acceptable motion to amend from your perspective? And is the seconder still agreeable? Okay, so now, does everyone understand where we are? So we have to read the whole thing, and let's take that paragraph by paragraph.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first, therefore be it resolved clause says, therefore be it resolved by the City of Eau Claire that it encourages citizens of all ages to participate in all City Council meetings, including their child or children of elected council members as needed or desired. And, may I continue? Be it further resolved that the City Council affirms meeting decorum in the handbook that ensures proper decorum and the abidance of Robert's Rules of Order, including refraining from disturbing the assembly. Be it further resolved that the City Council encourages an engaged community and encourages all qualified citizens to seek elected office and serve their community. In the last, be it further resolved that the City Council directs the City Manager to propose the creation of an advisory task force that seeks to decrease barriers and increase participation to elected office, boards, commissions, and committees.
So discussion is in order on the motion to amend. Councilmember Mitchell.
Thank you. I have a question. So with the first, therefore be it resolved, are you now extending from infants and toddlers to children? Well, anybody of any age can be on the dais with a relative?
Councilmember Emanuel.
Yes, my intention is if somebody who is elected needs or wants to bring their child, that they may. I would use the word child as 17 or under, although it would, yep.
Questions or discussion? Further questions or discussion? Councilmember
Thank you,
Will?
Council President. I just want a second to so, yeah, Ben, back to the verse, therefore, it doesn't mention the dais. It just states, be it resolved by the City of Eau Claire that it encourages citizens of all ages to participate in all City Council meetings, including the child or children or elected council members as needed or desired. Is the dais, maybe I just need clarification. Is this a City Council meeting as a whole, the dais and the citizens?
Councilmember Emanuel.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Councilmember Weld. The intention is to create language that would be clear for city council members that there's no question about any city council meeting that if an elected member needed or wanted to bring their child, they could. Of course, following all of the rules of decorum, including no disturbing the assembly per Robert's rules, and does not make a distinction between tables, essentially, whether it's a dais or another type of table that the body would meet at.
Just a follow-up. Does it need to be clarified? Maybe I can ask City Attorney Nick, but does it need to be clarified as to, since that's what this is about, where children can or can't be?
Mr. Nick?
It's an entirely up to the legislature type of issue. I mean, I think you certainly are able to set reasonable boundaries of what is your workspace and limit access to it. And at least to the extent I didn't muddle my understanding of Councilmember Klinkhammer's earlier question, doing so and establishing those sort of workspace areas, whether you consider it, the floor or the dais, is within your ability to do. Doesn't violate the open meetings law or any other law. So to the extent you want to make that distinction, that's up to you. The only other quick observation I'd make about that resolve clause as it's written is it includes children or children of elected officials, but it actually, so that's including or a subset, it actually applies to citizens of all ages. So the operative phrase is it encourages citizens of all ages to participate in council meetings. Now, you can decide what participation means. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have the ability to come up and sit at the dais, but that's the phrase, and then it includes the subset of child or children of elected officials.
Just a clarification, then, as it's written now, what is the city's interpretation of where children or children can't be?
I mean, I hear what Councilmember Emanuel says, but reading the written word, it doesn't really inform that for me. I would not be left with any guidance on that based on the written word.
Councilmember Tebow.
Thank you, Council President. As I look at this too, and I think this is just the process we have when these come up. Now we're just seeing this for the first time and for reasons well explained. I also have to say the term child is not defined. Is that a half-child, a stepchild, or in my family we had people who weren't even close to children, but they were called children. And if you're not married and that's not a legal child, then can I bring that person even though we've been cohabitating, but we have no legal definition and I have no legal guardianship? I also wonder too, when I look at being one of my family members became guardian of an adult or a young 16, 15-year-old, would that person be included? They are the legal guardian, but it doesn't refer to that, or I'm the legal guardian of my parents. So maybe to have Mr. Nick work a little bit more in helping us understand what it says.
Do you have further comment?
I really don't. I mean those are points taken. I mean there is a reasonableness rule that certainly I'm going to read into anything that's adopted. We certainly try to take guidance from your discussion. The same sort of open terms were true of the main resolution that's presently before the board or the body is unamended.
Thank you. That's all.
Councilmember Klinkhammer.
Thank you, Madam President. There's a lot in this amendment that it's hard to disagree with. but it's a sweeping document, and it is entirely different than the resolution that was before us, that is before us now. If we, as a body, don't want this resolution, we should defeat it. Fine. But this is way more than what we should be trying to undertake in one sitting with no real preparation. So.
Councilmember Van Hayden.
I agree with Councilmember Klinkhammer. The things that Councilmember Emanuel has written in here are a lot of them in here are very good and are very positive things, but it's too much at this point in time. I think we should defeat that, and if there is something that of this nature to come up for a future meeting, that's fine. Bring it forth at that meeting and we can discuss it and vote on it, because saying the comments in here are very good, but it's too far-reaching at this point in time to do.
Councilmember Worthman.
Thank you, Council President. I'll be supporting this motion. When I look at the language there, I agree with my colleagues. There's really nothing in there that we should be voting against. And I think what Councilmember Emanuel is focused on here is creating a resolution that gets to the same thing, but through different kind of language. And so if you read it, it really talks about putting the emphasis on decorum. It talks about the council president's ability to manage our meetings. It talks about disruptions and how they aren't accepted in council chambers if they're a distraction from our assembly and our work. And so I think you're exactly right. These are all things that we should be voting yes for, and the spirit of it is just differently put in a much more welcoming language, but getting at the same exact thing. My opinion is, if we vote this up, we will be running a good meeting with little distraction and being able to get our work done. And I don't know how a person could read that differently.
Councilmember Mitchell.
Well, I think it's unclear how to read it, but it's not the same thing. We just voted to say that we do not want children on the dais, and this allows children on the dais, unless I'm reading it wrong. Councilmember Emanuel is giving up everything she's been fighting for the last however long. So I'll be voting against this.
Councilmember Klinkhammer.
Thank you again. I take exception to Councilmember Worthman's comment. The one thing it does do is it commits a lot of staff time through this task force. And before we went through a whole process not that long ago dealing with efficiencies in our commissions and committees. And now we're about to start, without really thinking about it, we're about to start another one. And I think that by itself should give us a little pause for concern before we enact something like this resolution as amended.
Councilmember T-Walt.
Thank you, Council President. Appreciate all the input I've heard after reviewing it, and I too am troubled with the creating of an advisory task force and putting that on. This is too broad, too vague, and is not ready. So I will not be supporting this item.
And there is your light on. Councilmember Emanuel.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to speak in support of this, of course. I think that the weight of this resolution and, in my opinion, the potential chilling effects this could have on other legislative bodies, in my mind, this gets at a way that we can include people, and there would not be a question of, do I have to sacrifice being a parent or seeking elected office? And the idea of an advisory task force is that a task force is different than a commission or a committee. A task force has a limited time period, and that could be created or recommended by the city manager if this was picked up. We could see a proposal that might say for the next 6 months or for the next 3 months, we would invite 11 people, 18 people, however many, to start really having conversations and then taking actionable steps around how do we create or increase participation and how do we decrease the barriers. I serve on the appointments committee, and heaven help us, it's hard to get people to sign up sometimes. It's really hard. And so maybe we can use this moment to say, all right, let's figure out in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, how do we do that? How do we get at making this environment in our city, and in particular this organization, this is the place to be for current and new generations. Let's make City Hall one of those places to be. And I think we've really struggled with that. So I think creating an advisory task force this is not a long-term commitment. There's no legislation that would come out of it. It's advisory only. And I think could give us an opportunity to have some meaningful conversation around what can we do as an organization to bring more people into the fold.
And there being no further discussion on the motion to amend, everyone understands? Clerk, please call the roll. And I vote deletes or replaces the original resolution barring a few words in the first whereas clause with that language. Deletes the original resolution barring a few words in the first whereas and replaces it with that. Okay? That's what an I vote does. Clear, everybody? Okay. Madam?
Councilmember Worthman,
Aye.
Jean,
No.
Beaton,
Aye.
Emmanuel,
Aye.
Kincaid,
No.
Klinkhammer,
No?
Mitchell, Strobel,
No.
T-Walt,
No.
Von Hayden,
No?
Weld.
No.
And that motion to amend fails 8-3. We are back to the resolution as amended. Discussion is in order. Councilmember Stroh.
Thank you. I haven't said much to this point. It's a difficult situation, given our personal and professional relationships we all have with each other. And I didn't know quite where to start on some of the research on this, but I did look at the State Assembly Rule 25, where they do define decorum on the floor. And I looked at it like a business. We're doing the business of the city. And so I reached out to larger businesses and actually public institutions just to see how they handled the situations there. And most of them provided a comfortable space for someone that might need it. They provided them break time. But what they didn't provide is allowing those employees to bring their child to their workstation, to answer the phones, to their computers, to the reception desk. None of them, including the public institutions, allowed that. And so I think we're here to run the business of the city. I think the council needs to be attentive and focused on the issues that are brought before us. And so I don't think it's unreasonable for us to limit access to the dais. However, I also agree that the council is slightly different than a business because you can take a break and not really miss anything. But if somebody's sitting in the audience, they can't fully participate in the debate. And I know certainly if it comes up, I would always support a motion for a short recess if it became necessary for any council person that needed a break for any personal matters. And then it's not, it's my way or the highway, it's an either-or proposition here where the person could still serve and still tend to any particular needs that they had, and they would not miss council business. So I think that's a potential solution that this council could come to depending on how this all shakes out.
Any further discussion? Councilmember Beaton?
Thank you, Council President. We've talked about this a lot, and so I won't say too much more, but I just had two final thoughts. I wanted to highlight, I think that a lot of us have been getting a lot of feedback on this issue, and certainly in our email and by calls and on social media. And some things that I've been hearing that are really, I think, important to consider is that I've heard a lot from people who are on both sides of this, that what are we doing spending our time on this? And I think that, you know, when we're considering that our city is facing incredible rates of poverty and homelessness, and our global community faces climate change and all these important issues, I would have liked to see our city say, you know what, you do what you need to do, and we're going to move on to other things. I think that when we talk about staff time, I think that this has been 13 months of time spent for the council president, for Councilmember Emanuel, for the attorney, city attorney, and the city manager, and that's an incredible amount of staff time that we could have been spending on real important issues in our community. The other thing that I've really heard from the community, particularly from people in my generation, for people who are young professionals in our community, people who have decided to stay here after college, who have left and decided to come back, is that this conversation is embarrassing to them. This is a conversation that they're sad to say is happening in their community. And we have fostered a culture in our city where people are really proud of what's happening here. And I truly, truly believe that this resolution is going to be on the wrong side of history. And being a person who came to Eau Claire for college and has decided to stay because of how special it is, I'm really concerned about how that's going to affect our culture here in Eau Claire.
And Councilmember?
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to speak to an idea about council service as a workplace. And for many months, I, much to my dismay, spent a lot of time on hold with federal, I guess, inquiry lines that any citizen can call about labor laws. And I spent many hours on hold or waiting for my call to be answered with state labor laws to ask them, do I have any protection here? And I learned through the process that I am not considered an employee as an elected in any way, shape, or form. This is not my workspace. I do work here. I work hard. We all work hard. This is not my workspace, though. This is a public space. I appreciate the progress that was made to provide accommodations for nursing parents, and I enjoy those privileges every day at my job. I'm very grateful for the support I've received. It's not practical, though, to have those types of things, such as a break time. I appreciate the sentiment to go on recess. Could be a lot of recess, especially as kids get a little older. Sometimes they just nurse for a few minutes and then stop nursing, and a few minutes later, they nurse again. I don't want to miss my seat here at the table.
Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a little point that I hear all their comments for the last hour about this, and I do fully support women breastfeeding to children, and I know I believe that I have the more children compared to all you guys in this room, and I know how I feel. Yeah, so age 5 to 26, so it's a lot of kids. But as a city council member, I believe that we're here to represent everybody in the community and do what we can. That's what we're elected for. And we're here to listen to people, their voice, and their concerns, what we need to do for the community. And I kind of feel like, well, having kids here on the deck is kind of distracted me. And I kind of feel like, well, it's kind of not all the noise and all the motion and stuff, and you can't really focus, concentrate it what you're doing. That's what my thought is, and that's what I've been thinking for the last few hours and concerning. It's gonna be hard. I mean, it's a tough situation, and I don't know. I haven't decided, but it's really a situation I wish we have room somewhere here that we can take care of childcare, and so this does have to come forward, but it's our issues. So thank you.
Thank you. And further, Councilmember. I just have one last thought as well, that I'll be voting in favor of this resolution, and I did see a lot of the conversation on social media as well, and I think that making this an issue about age and suggesting that some of us are too old to make this decision doesn't further the cause of anybody. So I feel like I am able to vote yes on this resolution.
And there being no further, Councilmember Klinkhammer?
You thought you were done, didn't you? I can think back when I first decided to run for this position. I had to make some concessions. I had to get the support of my employer, my spouse, and I had to make a lot of changes. I'm sure that the sacrifices and the accommodations that had to be made for me to do this are nothing compared to a young mother. But for me, this issue comes down to one of perspective, and it's why we're dealing with this. And, are we voting to put up barriers for someone to serve our community? I don't think so. Are there going to be sacrifices that have to be made by anyone that's selected to this? Yes, there will. But if it comes down to a choice of security and safety for those of us that sit here and operate in an atmosphere that is conducive to sanity, to paying attention, to listening to our citizens as they come and speak before us, I'm going to opt to have the level of decorum that one would expect in a legislative body.
And Councilmember Worthman?
Thank you, Council President. And, I still think that if we vote this up today, that we send a signal that we are more exclusive and that we are making it more difficult. And I think about other governing bodies, for example, the European Union, that has been able to figure out a way to include mothers to bring their infants to their governing body. And I have not heard one bit about them seeing that as a problem for their governing body. The European Union, cities in our country have figured out a way to do this. But we're saying, no, we can't. We can't figure out how to do that. It's too difficult. So we're going to say no. Those are two very different signals.
And there being no further discussion, Councilmember.
Sorry. Thank you, Council President. You know, I guess I don't want this to be interpreted as we don't want the things that were initiated in Councilmember Emanuel's amendment or revised resolution. I mean, I think that's the goal for all of us, for the most of it anyway, is that we want to encourage families to be a part of the city council meetings, and we want young people and young mothers and young fathers to be interested in serving at some capacity within the city of Eau Claire. It's how it works. It's continually, creates a cycle. And so I don't think that it needs to be interpreted as a complete negative, what we're discussing and what we've come up with here. I think we can still find a way to create a task force if that's necessary, to look at other options. I think that's still something that can come later. I like Commissioner Strobel's idea of taking a recess for now, and if that's just the beginning stages of getting us to the next level, it's going to take time, and I think someone wrote in a letter that we received that there are a lot of things that aren't commonplace for us yet, and we need to get comfortable with certain things before we can move on to another level. And maybe we just need to take the time to get there. But I think that the way that we're structured, the way that this room is laid out, this is probably the best decision for right now, that we work with what's been presented and make the best of it, but at the same time stay open-minded about the future and where that leads to.
Thank you. And now, Councilmember Emanuel.
Thank you, Madam President. I have a question if the chair would allow for the city attorney to review what an aye vote means, what a no vote means, and in what scenario could somebody abstain?
Mr. City Attorney.
An aye vote approves the resolution as amended, and a no vote votes against it, and it's not for any of us to make any advice or determination on how to vote either way or to abstain. Those votes are entirely at the council members' judgment and discretion. On that last point, abstentions are always up to a council member. I'll occasionally get questions about whether a member might have an ethical conflict under state law, and I might advise abstention. But even so, even in those circumstances, abstentions are always, it's a vote of a council member, and the council member decides how to vote.
Councilmember Emanuel.
May I ask a follow-up question? Procedurally, in the past, when I have abstained from a vote, I have announced that at the beginning of the discussion and have excused myself from the room. If I were to abstain now, does that mean that I would be required to leave the room?
Mr. City Attorney.
No.
And there being no further discussion.
Madam Chair.
Councilmember Emanuel.
Thank you, Madam President. I am going to explain how I'm going to vote tonight. I'm not going to vote yes. because I think voting yes would put me in a position that would start creating a precedent for other legislative bodies that colleagues have to seek their elected peers' permission when there are no rules against bringing a child with you. There are no rules. If this gets passed today, the city of Eau Claire will be making a rule. There are no rules, and to the best of my knowledge, I have not heard of any other city that makes a rule banning a child from the dais. So I feel that if I voted yes for this, that I'm actually voting against my country. And I can't do that. I also can't vote no, because then I feel like I'm forced to vote against myself. I can't do that. What I really want to say is that I refuse. So I'll vote abstain, and if anyone wants to interpret that as a refusal, that's okay.
And there being no further discussion, clerk, please call the roll. And I vote adopts the resolution as amended.
Councilmember Jean,
No.
Beaton,
Abstain.
Emmanuel,
Abstain.
Kincaid,
Aye.
Klinkhammer,
Aye.
Mitchell,
Aye.
Strobel,
Aye.
T-Walt,
Aye.
Von Hayden,
Aye.
Weld,
Aye.
Workman.
Abstain.
And that resolution passes 7-1 with 3 abstentions. Is that correct? 7-1 with 3 abstentions. That brings to a close item 18 on our agenda. We do have one remaining item on our business agenda, a resolution canceling the city council meeting scheduled for December 25 and 26. Mr. Peters.
Thank you, Madam President. The council's had a practice of canceling their second meeting in December. This particular year, December 25th and 26th, which would be your normally scheduled meetings, actually fall on the Monday and Tuesday. And the resolution before you would allow you to cancel the second meeting in December.
Questions on a motion then by Councilmember, let's see, where are we? Weld, seconded by Councilmember T-Walt. Item 19 is moved and discussion is in order. There being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Emmanuel,
Aye.
Kincaid,
Aye.
Klinkhammer,
Aye.
Mitchell,
Aye.
Strobel,
Aye.
T-Walt,
Aye.
Weld,
Aye.
Workman.
Aye.
Jean.
Aye.
And that resolution passes. We have one ordinance for action tonight, an ordinance in accordance with the Wisconsin statutes annexing to the city of Eau Claire part of the town of Union known as the Horn Petition, H-O-R-N. Mr. Petrie.
The property owners at 2359 Sherman Creek Road would like to annex 1.3 acres from the town of Union to the city of Eau Claire. My understanding, the single-family home has a septic failure. The sewer and water is available along the street. This request is consistent with the comp plan. The Plan Commission did recommend approval, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Petrie. Questions? I see none. Thank you so much. The motion and by Councilmember Emmanuel, seconded by Councilmember Worthman. Item 20 is moved and discussion is in order. There being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Kincaid,
Aye.
Klinkhammer,
Aye.
Mitchell,
Aye.
Strobel,
Aye.
T-Walt,
Aye.
Weld,
Aye.
Workman, Jean,
Aye.
Emmanuel.
Aye.
And that resolution is, or ordinance is adopted. There are 3 ordinances for introduction. It is my duty to read them into the public record. The first is an ordinance in accordance with Wisconsin statutes annexing to the city of Eau Claire part of the town of Washington, known as the Grover Road LLC petition. The next ordinance for introduction is an ordinance amending the city of Eau Claire pay plan and practices. And the last, an ordinance amending the City of Eau Claire Employee Benefits and Leaves Plan. Does council wish to suspend the rules and take up any ordinance for introduction? There being no such desire, announcements are in order. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Madam President. No announcements tonight.
Announcements by council members? There being then no further business to come before this body, on a motion by Councilmember Mitchell, seconded by Councilmember Strobel, we are adjourned without objection.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and the City of Eau Claire. A transcript of this meeting is available for the hearing impaired. It will be available within 7 days of this telecast. Call 715-839-4912 or TDD 715-839-1689 or write Eau Claire City Clerk, P.O. Box 5148, Eau Claire, Wisconsin 54702-5148. Newsworks is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, please contact us via phone at 715-839-5067 or online at valleymediaworks.org.